I've never seen this film on a screen. This was the first film I made, and I had no idea how to make a film. There were just three of us, really, who made the film, and the cameraman, whose name is Bill Butler, later became a very successful cameraman in the United States. He wound up filming Jaws and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. But I made this film, when I made this film in 1961. You guys all remember 1961? When I made this film then, I was working in live television. I had no idea how to make a film. I had heard about a young African-American man who was on death row at the Cook County Jail in Chicago. He was on death row for murder. There were 5 people, all African Americans, who were involved in a daylight robbery of a canning company in the Chicago stockyards. 4 of the people confessed to the crime, and this man, Paul Crump, denied having anything to do with the crime. So he was sentenced to death in the electric chair. I heard about him strictly by accident from having met the Protestant chaplain at the Cook County Jail, whose name was Robert Surfling. And I met him just in a social situation. And I didn't know what to say to him. I asked him where his church was. And he said, I don't have a church. He said, I'm the chaplain on death row at the county jail. Well, that intrigued me, and I said, did you ever run across anyone who you thought was innocent on death row? And he said, yes, this one young guy. I think he's innocent, and the warden thinks he's innocent. And, oh, thank you, Tur. Skull. Thank you. And the warden has executed 3 people already, and he doesn't want to execute a 4th. And that was about the extent of the conversation I had. But I thought about this all weekend, and I called the priest, Father Surfling, at the county jail the following Monday, and I asked him, I wasn't even sure why, but I said, I'd like to meet this man. And he said, why? Why would you like to meet him? He's going to die in the electric chair in 6 months. And I said, I don't know. I work in television. Maybe I can do something. And he said, there's nothing that can be done except a pardon by the governor of Illinois, which is where Chicago is located, as I'm sure you all know. He said his final appeals have been exhausted at the Supreme Court of the United States, and he's going to die in the chair. And I said, well, look, if I can meet him, maybe I could do something for television that would help him. And Father Surfling said, look, we don't want to get his hopes up. He's finished. He's gone. He's not the same man who came in here 9 years ago. He's become a different person. And we think he's innocent, but we don't know. Anyway, he asked the warden, Warden Jack Johnson, and the warden let me meet Paul Crump, and I came to know him, and then the warden allowed me to go into death row at the Cook County Jail and film Mr. Crump. I also, because I didn't know what a documentary film was, I restaged the crime for which he was accused. So there are some parts of his story that I actually staged. But everyone being interviewed is the actual person who was involved, including Paul Crump. Now, I must warn you, the film is very crude. It's a film by someone who literally did not know how to make a film. My purpose in making this film was as a kind of court of last resort to save this man's life. And as it happened, before it was aired anywhere, it was shown to the governor of Illinois. And he sent me a note saying, I'm going to pardon Mr. Crump. I'm going to pardon him. We're not going to execute him. I'm going to pardon him to life in prison without possibility of parole. But he said, your film has saved his life, even though my parole and pardon board, the parole and pardon board that advised the warden, voted to let him die, but advised the governor. And the governor wrote to me saying, in spite of the recommendation of my parole and pardon board, I'm going to pardon this man's life. So this was the first thing I ever made on film. And I thought, my God, what a powerful medium film is. I make this stupid little picture, and I've saved a man's life. What a powerful medium this is. And then I went out to Hollywood. And I was disabused of all of my optimism. But this film has been run from time to time since, but not often because it's very primitive. We made it in 16 millimeter in black and white. How many of you are film students? Any? Just a few. And but all of you come often to the Cinematheque, yes? Yeah. It's a wonderful organization. I'm very glad that they're running this film here, even though, please forgive its quality and the amateurish lack of storytelling. I did not know how to tell a story on film. It's as though I set out to write the Fifth Symphony without reading music, or a piece by Carl Nielsen. I set out to perform it without being able to read music. That is exactly how I feel about this film. It was my first effort. Strangely, it won a great many awards, and that is what launched my career in film. Paul Crump served about 40 more years in jail after this. And then a new governor and a new parole and pardon board that had no memory of his crime decided to pardon him from prison. And he was let go from prison. By then I was in Hollywood, and he was given over to the care of his sister. He had a very tough time on the outside, having been in prison for more than 40 years. But the one thing I am proud of about this film, possibly the only thing, is that it saved his life. Do any of you have any questions for me before you see this, about this or anything else? It's okay if you do, because, yes.
I think I've heard you say in interviews that you afterwards have started to doubt whether he really was innocent. Could you say something about that?
Yes, well, I wrote my memoir, which is called The Friedkin Connection.
I read it. It's awesome.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks, Dad. It's my father over there. Yeah. I say in my book that when Paul Crump was pardoned, he was pardoned on one condition. He had to confess his guilt to the crime, which he had professed his innocence for 9 years. All he had to do was confess in those 9 years, and they would have let him go, like the other 4 guys who were caught with him. He claimed that he was innocent, and so they sentenced him to die. 40-some years later, they pardoned him, released him from jail, from prison, but he had to confess his guilt. Now, I don't know, I would probably have done the same. Many of you would. If you were suddenly offered your freedom, but all you had to do was say, yes, I did it. But it made me think about whether, in fact, he did do the crime or not. At the time, that didn't matter that much to me. I felt he was innocent. Everyone around him thought he was innocent. But it was a human life, and I don't believe in the death penalty. I strongly did not believe in the death penalty then. But when he was released, it made me wonder if, in fact, he had been guilty. And I never thought about it before that. I was convinced of his innocence. By the time he was released and confessed to the crime, I thought, well, maybe he had gamed the system, and perhaps I did too, because I made a film proclaiming his innocence, and out of that came my career as a film director. So I just leave that question as an open question in my book. And it's the way I've just answered you. I'm not sure any longer whether he in fact was innocent, but he did confess his guilt. Anything else? Well, if you're sure there's nothing else you want to ask me, I'm going to go off to have a lovely dinner of herrings with Nicholas Winding Refn, and who's going to interview me in a couple of days in concert with the film festival. But I hope you'll be able to sit through this film. I think it only runs an hour. But remember to think of it as the first work of a very young man who wanted to become a filmmaker, but whose primary focus was to save a man's life. If you think of it in that regard, perhaps that will overcome all of its flaws, and there are many, I assure you. But thank you for coming this evening, and God bless you all. Thank you. Thank you. I'll give this to you.